Hello. Okay. I should be on right now. Okay. Well, I'm back. This time probably going to go for a normal amount of time because I'm not nearly as ill. Luckily, it was a quick just cough and sore throat kind of thing, and it disappeared as quick as it left. So we did board last time. In my coughing state. Really should have waited. I could have, and I would have been much better. And I could have done this at this sort of time and it would have been fine, but I'm stubborn like that. Anyway, we're going to be going through Cleric, which, as you can see, has a lot of subclasses. So it could be that we might not be able to get through two, but I feel like I will just push to do two anyway. Anyway, as you know, bias on this one is that I consider Cleric to be my favourite class out of all the classes. It's definitely up there with Druid. So I'm going to be biased towards these things just in general, but it's impossible to get rid of your unintentional bias. Let's start off with Arcane. So the Arcane domain gets access to a bunch of spells, as you'll see with all the cleric classes. I'm pretty sure. Detect Magic, Magic Missile are pretty decent. Detect Magic is always useful, especially if you can ritual cast it, because it just can help in finding out generally, like, okay, what thing is cursing me, or what thing is on this magical item, or what is emanating from this room. It's very useful to detect magic. So it's always good to have at least one person with it on your group. Magic Missile's very good for breaking concentration on stuff. I think this borderline, it's not needed, but the fact that you can guarantee damage the enemy multiple times and you can split it up to hit a bunch of them one time, and it can be like a finishing off tool or it can be a break their concentration tool, because it's like it could be three instances of make a concentration check. Now, knowing some bosses that might not be enough, but it's very good. Magical weapon, very niche. I don't think that comes up very much often, but having it could come up. You can put this on someone else, not necessarily your own weapon. So it might be decent on the earlier levels. This one I've never seen before. You place an illusion on a creature or an object you touch, so that divination spells reveal false information. It can be a willing creature or an object that isn't being carried or worn. False aura. Can change the way the target appears to spells and magical effects, such as detect magic. That detects magical auras. You can make a non-magical object appear magical, and a magical object to appear non-magical, or change the object's magical aura so it appears to belong in a different school of magic. When you cast a spell, choose one of the following rates. If you cast a spell on the same creature object every day for 30 days, it lasts, placing the same effect on it each time. The illusion lasts until it's dispelled. Okay, so over time you can make a an object that is completely mundane look magical. So you could sell it off. You could do it like a kind of like cheap trick on somebody, but it also could be used to hide a potential magical artifact from detection, which is quite interesting. Also, using this on using this as a narrative tool of why the thing that you saw and you cast detect magic on didn't show up as a magical item. It also works. The second ability is Mask. You change the way the target appears to spell that detects creature types. Oh, okay, that's really interesting. I honestly think this ability helps I could see it being used by a player narratively a couple of times for like hiding a MacGuffin that the enemy wants from their sight. But I feel like the mask definitely and the falser aura most of the time will be used by the DM as a narrative tool. Spell magic, very useful. Out of combat, it's huge. In combat, it can be very good. If you're just like, I can't break this person's concentration, so I'm just going to dispel their magic. Or if they're blocking you with like a wall of force or a wall of fire. Or even just something like spike growth. Magic circle. Is create a 10-foot radius and a 20-foot tall cylinder of magical energy. Okay. Choose one or more following types of creatures. So it affects those type of creatures in the following way. Okay. They can't enter it by non-magical means. Can't willingly enter the cylinder by non-magical means. It tries to use teleport or interplanar to do so. It must succeed on a charisma save, which has disadvantage on attack rolls against the target within the cylinder. The targets within the cylinder can't be charmed, or frightened, or possessed by the creature. Oh, and then you can switch it so it prevents them from leaving. I quite like this. If you're going into a big battle with if you know a big boss is coming towards you instead of you going to them, you have time to put the cylinder down. Say it's this big scary fiend. You put the circle in it, you put all your ranged combatants in it, and it's just like they could just shoot freely. Good luck getting to them. Although if it's a devil, they're probably going to have high charisma. But that's a niche time. Arcane Eye, always useful. Especially just the ability to look in every direction. Just having some sort of sentry is never bad. This, it might come up. I'll be honest. It's this kind of like spell. I don't think this will ever really come up in my opinion. But you may find interest in it. Plain or binding, always good, always fun to use. Has such a cool narrative thing that can go with it. I know I always bring up narrative thing, but what I mean with this one is that this can be a big story element. Binding a big boss, or even just a creature that can be like forced into servitude with you, which I know sounds evil, but you can be playing an evil campaign and it could be a necessary risk. Very good. Teleportation circle, very good as well. So it gets access to a lot of utility spells that you would normally associate with a wizard, which makes sense when you look at Arcane Domain. They also get an ability, Arcane Initiate. When you choose this domain at level 1, which is important to note, you get all of these at level 1, which makes sense because what are you if you're a cleric without a god, what are you? You're not a cleric. You gain proficiency in the arcane skill, makes sense as literally your domain. You gain 2 cantrips from the wizard spell list, which is very useful because getting stuff from the wizard spell list is like you get access to effectively so many spells. So many freaking spells. It's got the biggest spell list, so it makes sense. You also get access to the arcane domain specific channel divinity. All of them will have one of these. They range from being pretty decent to being pretty bad. As an action, you present your holy symbol and one celestial elemental fiend of your choice that's within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw, provided that the creature can see or hear you. If the creature fails its saving throw, it's turned for 1 minute until it takes any damage. So it's a turn undead, but for other creatures. The third creature must spread its turn moving away. Yep. At 5th level, when a creature fails its saving throw against your ability, the creature is banished for 1 minute, as in the banishment spell. No concentration required. And if it isn't from the plane of origin, and its challenge rating is below the threshold, Okay, so it's banishment for specific stuff. I think this has a problem, which is one, it's worse than casting banishment, and two, with this restriction, it's almost always just going to be a turn things other than undead, which doesn't seem very useful. But we'll see. I could be wrong. Starting at 6th level, when you restore hit points to an ally with a spell slot of 1st or higher, you can end one spell of your choice on that creature. Pretty decent. The level of the spell you end must be equal or lower. Okay, so it could be one of those things where it's like, in addition to me hitting them with hitting this person with a scorching ray, you can also get rid of that haste that he has on him. That's pretty decent. You get potent spell casting, very good feature. Having the possibility of taking this one instead is always good, in case you have gone more melee. Don't know why you would. It wouldn't really fit as much, but you could. Arcane Mastery. At 17th level, you choose 4 spells from the wizard spell list. One from each of the following levels, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. You add them to your domain spells, and they always count as cleric spells for you. So weirdly, that with this one, is it becomes a bit more of like a soft multi-class into wizard, only at the very, very end. I guess these spells actually help you as well, but you don't get the choice. I like Arcane Domain because it makes sense with how there are gods of magic in the world. That there'd be people like this. And also I think it fits a decent niche with all the wizard spells it gets. They can just do a load of stuff a cleric can't do. I'm a fan of it. I don't think it's particularly impressive, and I think both its channel divinity and its most of its abilities kind of get overshadowed by a lot of the newer ones, but that's just to be expected for the older dominions. Blood Dominion. I'm pretty sure this is from Matt Mercer's book. Yeah, it is. Which I love the idea of. False Life. I don't get much use out of it, but it's some temp health. Sleep's always good. Hold Person's quite useful. Grave Enfeelment's a good spell. Haste, Slow are always good. I have a soft spot actually for Slow, because I used to think it was bad, and then I saw it in action and I realised how good that spell actually is. It is equivalent to Haste. Blight, a very highly damaging spell. Stone Skin, I don't think really comes up much. Especially with it being a 4th level spell and it having that specific thing of saying non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. I harp on about this a lot, but I feel like once you get past level, I'd say level 10, maybe even earlier, you stop running into stuff that doesn't inherently have magical attacks in most games. Most games that I've seen, most games that I've been in. You'll probably have a magical weapon or a way of doing magical damage, and they'll probably as well, because they should really. A lot of the time, the elites will have better stuff than you. Dominate Person's always a good spell. Hold Person's a really good spell. And I understand that this Stone Skin, you get it at 7th. I'm just saying that the spell itself, what you're using for it, especially with the fact that it also is to cast a spell, it costs 100 gold. You're spending 100 gold for something that, at least at 7th level, most stuff will have magical attacks. If you're fighting elementals, you're screwed from the start. In addition to that, you also get martial weapon proficiency, which is interesting, because that means that you can start using the more. This feels more like a melee fighter, but not one that gets heavy armor. So supposedly, maybe not supposed to be a frontline tanker as much. These spells don't really, to me, other than haste and slow, don't, maybe false life as well, don't feel like melee fighter spells, but maybe that's just me. You also get bloodletting focus. Your divine magic draws the blood from magically inflicted wounds, worsening the agony of your foes. When you cast a damage dealing spell of first level or higher, whose duration is instantaneous, so a lot of those Scorching Ray, Blight, for example, those kinds of spells, like the instant damage spells. Any creature with blood that takes damage from the spells take an extra necrotic damage equal to 2 plus your spell level. I think early on you're not really going to care about this, and you're like, oh, I don't get this extra 6 damage. That doesn't really matter to me. But then when you're hitting the later levels, and this is an extra 17 damage on every first level spell, it starts becoming increasingly more relevant. And I wonder. Oh no, I guess it's not on every first level or high spell. I've misread that. It doesn't say plus your. I just assumed it said plus your proficiency bonus. It says plus your spell level. Okay, so it's just a little bit of extra damage that you'll probably never really care about. But it's always nice to have. I like having those little bits of extra damage. I know why it says only creatures with blood, but that sort of restriction, it scares me because the Blood Hunter had that for all of them but the one subclass, and because of that, it felt very weak. It wasn't the only reason, but it was one of the reasons. Let's have a look. Channel Divinity, Cursed Bond. Starting at second level, you can use your Channel Divinity to form a supernatural bond with a creature you can see, or with a creature from which you possess a blood sample. The bond lasts for 1 hour, or until your concentration is broken. While this bond is in effect, you can use your action to learn the target's approximate distance and direction from you, as well as its current hit points and any conditions affecting it, as long as you're within 10 miles of you. Okay. Alternatively, you can use your action to attempt to connect with the target's senses. You take 2d6 damage, necrotic damage, and the target makes a Constitution saving throw against your spell save DC. On a success, the bond ends. On a failure, you choose to either see or hear through the target's senses for a number of minutes equal to your wisdom modifier. During this time, you are blinded or deafened, respectively, with regards to your own senses. Okay. So it's a tracking tool. It's just a tracking tool. But to actually go the next distance, you have to then take damage. Interesting. I like the Channel Divinity, but I don't love it. It feels like it didn't need this extra damage thing, which I'm assuming is going to be flavor reasons. Bearing in mind that even if you fail, it just ends, and that you've lost your whole thing, or your whole problem. I don't know. I can see it being used in a chase scene, and I can see it having a lot of use, but I don't inherently. I don't like that it's a pretty bad ability on the surface, and also you take damage for it. Channel Divinity Blood Puppet. Okay, so they give you another option to use your Channel Divinity. Starting at 6th level, you can use your Channel Divinity to briefly control a creature's actions, whether the creature is living or dead. As an action, you target a large or smaller creature or corpse within 60 feet of you that has blood. Creature Use target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC or be charmed by you. An unconscious creature automatically fails its saving throw and is incapacitated while you control its actions. A corpse targeted by this effect gains a semblance of life that you control. Okay, doing it on somebody who's awake and conscious, you got to make a save. Doing it on somebody who is unconscious or dead doesn't matter. On the affected creature or animated corpse's turn, you command it, no action required, to move its half its speed and use its action to do one of the following: interact with an object, make a single attack, do nothing. You get like an animated corpse that you make, you can sort of send out to do extra attacks, or to go press a button that you need to be pressed. An animated corpse or unconscious creature that takes its turn immediately after yours, but can't move or take actions unless you command it to do so. But your command takes no action. I guess it means if you're incapacitated, it won't do anything. If you can't speak. Affected living creature makes a new saving throw at the end of each of its turns. Okay. So just never do it on a living creature because you have all these extra problems with it. I like this ability. I like this ability a lot more. Makes an animated corpse could go and do a single attack, and based on how this is worded, you can do some really interesting things where... Sorry, it's just taking a drink there. If you're dealing with... Even if you just kill this like big ogre that was doing these really strong attacks, but we wasn't really doing that many attacks. Like they were doing like 1, maybe 2 attacks. Then you're dealing with this other dude that's appeared that's pretty strong as well. You can animate the ogre that you killed, and it's getting a single attack, but that attack's pretty strong because it's the attack that it was used against you. That's pretty cool. At 6th level, you can sacrifice a portion of your own vitality to recover expended spell slots as an action. The spell slots can have a combined level equal to or less than half your cleric level. And none of the slots can be 6th level or higher. Okay, you're still gonna get 5th though. Take 1d8 necrotic damage for each spell slot level you recovered, which can't be reduced in any way. So if I wanted to get a 5th level spell slot back, I'd have to take 5d8 damage. That's a lot. That is a lot. I like the feature though. I can see the theme he's going for. I mentioned this before with the tragedy bard, but he's very good at making them thematic and make sense. And his idea for this was obviously blood being the big one, but the sort of underarching one was, how do I make blood domain different to all the other clerics? And I've done that by making it so a lot of my abilities involve you taking damage. I've seen another way they've done something like this before. I've seen a blood druid done by Grim Hollow, who were a big group that make D&D books, and their whole shtick was you sacrifice hit die, and then the more specific like Wizards of Blood and the Druids of Blood have ways of mitigating the fact you have to use your hit die for it. Overall, I quite like both of these abilities. I think this one, with the way it's statted, is you're going to be taking a lot of self damage, which hopefully, with how it's set, with you getting martial weapons, I feel like you don't want to be taking damage. So I feel like this one's a bit weird, but I guess you can go in with like a berserker feel. It sort of works. You get Divine Strike, and you get better Divine Strike. Channel Divinity, Blood Puppet. You can now choose huge or smaller. Okay, that's pretty big. Yeah, I think that's a good decent ability, but getting in that late, and you know it's going to be useful. Because the thing about this blood puppet thing is it scales in a way that you don't even see here, which is it scales because the people you're fighting are going to be stronger. So the things you can reanimate are going to be stronger. Vascular corruption aura. I love that name. At the 17th level, you can use your action to emit a deadly aura of necrotic energy that causes the veins of nearby foes to burst and bleed. Jesus. For 1 minute, any hostile creature with blood that moves within 30 feet of you for the first time on its turn, or starts its turn there, takes 3d6 necrotic damage. If the hostile creature with blood regains hit points while in this aura, it regains only half as much. Okay, I quite like this feature. It reminds me very much of the Paladin's big capstone feature, where it's just like, I become this living embodiment that's really powerful that you've got to deal with. I quite like it. Obviously, it's not as powerful as some of the Paladin capstone ones, but I think it's very good. I think I like with the theming with this one in general. I feel like the way he's done it, though, I don't understand how you're supposed to. What's the optimal or the assumed way? Sorry, not optimal, the assumed way he wants to play this. Because you get martial weaponry, which implies to me that you're supposed to be a medium armor boy that goes into combat and does your damage, right? But then I look at the spells and I see 3 of them that I understand why they're there for that. Maybe 4 out of, what is that? 2, 4, 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You've got 10 spells, but only 4 of them to me are quite obviously made to be spells that would be used in combat like that. And the other ones feel a bit out of place. You get Ray of Enfeeblement, but if you're in melee, you're going to have disadvantage on this because you're doing a ranged thing. Same with Blight. Actually, Blight's a saving throw. But, like, I don't see this as an ability I'd give my melee user that has magic. Same with Dominate Person. It's a concentration thing. You want to be as far away from other enemies that can break it as possible. Same with Hold Monster. And Hold Person. And Sleep. That's a lie, actually. Sleep is different. So other than me not understanding how he intends it to be used, I think it's very good thematically. He's always good with thematics. And it's very, very good, like, mechanically, as, like, these would be cool abilities to make me continue to play. Death. Death one is very interesting. You'll see one later that is called Grave. And I don't know if I like the fact that both Death and Grave exist, because I liked the idea of Death being not just used by undead creatures or patron or like necromancers, specific necromancers and liches and stuff, but it was instead also used by the people that keep the things dead. But as you'll probably see with Grave later, Grave seems to take that point instead. Because there's stuff like Hades here. Hades should just have Grave, really, based on what he does, because he doesn't send them out. Anyway, you get access to a lot of effectively death-themed spells. So, False Life, it's necrotic. Ray of Sickness kills you. Blindness of Death and Deafness is like getting you ready for death. Same with Ray of Revealment. Animate Dead, your death. Vampiric Touch, it's an undead thing. Blight, same. Death Ward, it's literally got the word death in it. Anti-life shell. What's the anti? What's anti-life? Death. Cloud Kill, it has the word kill. When you kill, you're dead. You know, it's all those kinds of stuff. It also has access to the martial weapon thing again, which implies that this one also wants to get into melee. It also gives you a necromancer cantrip, which could be quite useful. I think I'm pretty sure Spare the Dying's necromancy, which is pretty decent. I like the idea, as it says here, when you cast a necromancer cantrip that normally targets only one creature, you can instead target two creatures within range and within 5 feet of each other. So if two people have been knocked unconscious really close to each other, it's like, boom, I Spare the Dying both of them. They don't have to roll anymore. Although, if I'm being honest, I think I prefer rolling, because if I roll, I could get a crit. And if I die, I die. Who cares? Channel Divinity. When the cleric hits a creature with a melee attack, the cleric can use the Channel Divinity to deal an extra necrotic damage to the target. The target is equal to 5 plus twice cleric level. 5 plus twice cleric level. So that isn't bad. At max level, you are doing 45 damage, which isn't insignificant. Yeah, I quite like it. I quite like how it's a bit more focused with this one. Like, if you compare it to the Blood Domain one, where you got a tracking feature, this one emphasizes the fact that, yes, you will be in melee, and you will be doing melee attacks, which I quite like. Inescapable Destruction. Starting at 6th level, the cleric is able to channel negative energy. The ability to challenge negative energy becomes more potent. Necrotic damage dealt by the character's cleric spells and channel divinity options ignore resistances to necrotic damage. That's quite useful. It's not one of those ones that has a ton of things that is like a ton of creatures that are resistant to its damage type. But if you're in a game in like a made up world by the DM, I mean, they can do whatever they want, right? So this may come up, especially if they know about it and they want to make that feature do something. Got the Divine Strike, and you've also got it doing extra necrotic damage, which sadly doesn't get affected by this feature because it's not a spell, but it's still fine. And then there's Improved Reaper. Starting at 17th level, when a cleric casts a necromancy spell of 1st through 5th that targets one creature, the spell can instead target 2 creatures within range of 5 feet of each other. Okay, and if it's material, you have to... Okay, so you could revivify 2 people. I'm pretty sure that's necrotic. What the hell is this? What are these? That doesn't matter. I think overall this is a good class. I think generally it just gets a load of stuff that both makes it so you can do unique things with necrotic spells. It actually works decently well as a kind of utility person, which you wouldn't expect really. But it really does. Because you get Spare the Dying, that you can sort of make sure that they don't die. You also bring people back, and you can do it quickly as well. That's pretty decent. I quite like this one. You can see the difference between this one and the Blood Domain in that this one's weaker, probably. And this one, theme-wise, is just what if melee? And also you had access to necrotic spells and they were good. but it feels more streamlined because it really only has one thing it's doing. It's I use melee, right? I quite like that one. No complaints really. It's a little on the weak side, I guess. That's I guess the only complaint I could have. But you expect that because I think if I could be wrong, but I think yeah, it's a DMG one, so it's an older one. Forge Cleric. Quite like that this exists, honestly, because I think you don't need just elements there. It's why I always tell my friends that the next cleric subclass that they should add, and I don't mind if it takes a while because there is a lot of subclasses for the cleric already. But the next one they should add is Cleric of the Hunt. You know, your Artemis style kind of thing. Because I just think it would make sense and it's a niche that hasn't been taken. There's also nature, but Hunt to me feels more like animal kind of primal stuff. Give them access to some ranger spells would be interesting. Forge Domain. You get access to a decent amount of cool spells. Searing Smite, always fun to get. I love all these special smites. They're not particularly good, and most of the time they're strictly weaker than just Divine Smiting, but I love them. Heat Metal, such an annoying spell. Especially if your opponent has a magical sword in their hand that's got metal in it. Magic Weapon I've talked about before. It's okay, it's not bad. Identify will come up loads. It's kind of a needed spell in your party. Elemental Weapon. A little bit of extra damage. I'll be honest, you don't want to be concentrating on this. You probably want to be concentrating on something else. Protection from elements. It'll come up. If a big attack's coming, and you're like... Or, like, you're... Sorry, I was thinking of Absorb element there. This will come up in the situation where you know that you're going to fight Ignitus, the fire elemental lord, and you're like, whoa, I touch our barbarian. No, probably not the barbarian. I touch the warrior, the fighter, or whoever our front combatant is, like the paladin, and I go, cool, you have resistance to fire. I imagine that's gonna come up. Fabricate narratively makes sense to have. And is quite useful to just get little tools and stuff that you want. Wall of Fire, I use this so often, and my friend in one of the campaigns used this to perfection to effectively cut off half the enemies from fighting us so that we could focus on the enemies that were already there and significantly reduce the amount of damage we would have taken in that fight. Potentially turn that fight from a loss to a win, honestly. Animate objects. Cool. It's a cool ability. I like the fact that the bigger they get, you can't really see it with how I've done this, but the bigger they get, the less AC they have, but more damage they do. Because they're bigger, so they're easier to hit. But they're bigger, so they hit for more. Creation, always useful. The ability to just sort of get something needed for potentially a spell. Oh, never mind. That doesn't work. But this can still come up. By the way, I know it's a bit late to be saying this, seeing as I'm on like my fifth stream about D&D. I will make mistakes. That's why it says rambling and not review, because I don't think I'm good enough to review. I like to think I'm good enough to ramble. This is another one that gives you proficiency. This one, armor proficiency and smith tools. Heavy armor, specifically. Very useful. You've just turned yourself into a tank. It's a couple that give you this, and it sort of gives you a direction of what that subclass is going to give you. Also, you get the ability to imbue magic into a weapon or armor. At the end of a long rest, you touch a non-magical object that is a suit of armor or a simple or martial weapon. Until the end of your next long rest, or until you die, The object becomes a magical item granting +1 AC if it's an armor, and +1 attack and damage. It makes a +1 weapon or a +1 armor. Pretty useful early on. This is insane. Even later on, it might come up. Maybe you start putting this on like an NPC companion you've brought with you instead, because you went full magical at this point. Artisanal Blessing. You conduct an hour-long ritual that crafts a non-magical item that must include some metal. A suit of armor, 10 pieces of ammunition, a set of tools, a simple or martial weapon, or another metal object. The creation is complete at the end of the hour. Coalescing? I know that word, but I can't say it. Appearing is effectively what that says. In a space of your choice within 5 feet of you. The thing you create can be something that's worth no more than 100 GP. That's still decent. Can't make yourself full plate, but it's pretty decent. You must lay out metal, which include coins of equal value to the creation. The metal irreversibly coalesces and transforms into the creation and the ritual's end, magically forming even non-metal parts of the creation. So, as it says there, later on that I haven't read, you can use this to get yourself a copy of a key that you have access to briefly. You can get yourself access to weaponry if it's all been taken away from you by, a prison guard or something. Pretty useful. It will come up. At least I feel like it will, if in an average game. Soul of the Forge. This just makes you more tanky. It's your resistance to fire damage, which makes sense because you're in a forge. Forge uses flames. And heavy armor gives you +1 AC. Pretty useful. Means you can tank even better. Divine Strike. We know what Divine Strike is. The only difference you'll be seeing is the different kinds of damage. Like the Blood one, I think, did necrotic. And so did Death. Death one definitely did necrotic, and this one does fire. Which is strictly worse, but you don't care about that kind of stuff. At least I don't. Saint of the Fortune Flame, an upgraded version of the previous one. This time it gives you immunity to fire, which can be pretty useful. The fact you gaining immunities is quite rare in this. And you also get, while wearing heavy armor, you're resistant to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. Not very useful. I harp on about this, but at 17th level, you're not fighting a basic goblin with a basic rusty dagger. You're not fighting a bandit that has just a decent iron sword. At 19th level, you're fighting either elite fighters, so like royal guards that you know are going to be given magical weaponry. Assuming it isn't incredibly low fantasy, you'll be dealing with elementals, all of magical weaponry. Angelic things, all of magical weaponry. Most monstrosities at that level, magical weaponry. Fiends, magical weaponry. It's all going to be like that. This won't come up much, but what it will do, narratively, will it allow there to be a situation where your character is literally just walking through a bunch of bandits that are attacking him, taking no damage, or very little, because they have such a high AC that these basic bitch bandits can't hit. When they do hit, they do half damage. So that can be a cool visual, but I don't think it comes up in battle much. Overall, I like Forge. Forge is pretty good. It's a slightly different to the ones we've seen before because it doesn't get access to martial weaponry. But what it makes up for that is it gets heavy armor, which means they have a ton of AC, plus all the extra things they get to AC with the Soul of the Forge, giving them a +1. They just sit there, probably with a shield, tanking the hits and casting spells that are doing either damage over time or keeping your allies up while you sit there and take the hits. It's very good subclass. I'm a big fan of it. I'll be honest, I probably will be constantly repeating myself here because I think I like every class here. And another extra thing, I don't think this one is nearly as weak as these Arcane and Death. Because this one, I feel like you get a lot of tools that can make you very, very strong. Arcane's actually not that weak either. Grave. This is the one I was talking about before, which I wish was combined with Death, really. And just have it as the two sides of it. But Grave is effectively good Death. It's the one that's like, hold on a second, undead are bad, let's keep them rested. You've got the Undying Core, you've got the Hades and Nubis, any one of those ones that their whole shtick there is that they guard, like, the underworld. And unlike in the Hercules movies, they're not, like, really pissed off and want to, send all of this, get up into heaven, Olympus. You're going to see a very similar spell list. As you can see, Real Enfeeblements there, False Life's there. You get a couple of changes like Bane, Gentle Repose, which makes sense because it keeps undead down. But still, Vampiric Touch is there. They still get Raised Dead, but the logic, I think, is that they're temporary. They're like using fire against fire. Blight's still there, Death Ward's still there, Anti-Life is still there. There's not too much of a difference. It's only very slight from it and Death. Because at the end of the day, Grave is using the powers of necromancy to stop necromancy. Circle of Mortality. At first level, you gain the ability to manipulate the line between life and death. When normally you would roll one or more dice to restore hit points with a spell to a creature that at 0 hit points, you instead use the highest possible number for each die. In addition, you learn Spare the Dying, which doesn't count against your cleric cantrips that you know, and it has a range of 30 feet. So it's a similar thing. Also, it's a bonus action. A similar thing to the Death one again. Except this one's more obviously, I'm trying to keep you alive, and less, I'm trying to kill the enemy. But they are quite similar. I quite like this heal max, because this means that when you're getting somebody up, maybe with this class, you're not necessarily always using the lowest heal that you physically can do. Because if I'm hitting you with a heal spell, and I know for a fact this heal spell's going to roll max, I'm going to be hitting you with stronger healing spells. I quite like this ability. I think it would be really helpful in combat. In combat. Eye of the Grave. At first level, you gain the ability to occasionally sense the presence of the undead, whose existence is an insult to the natural cycle of life. As an action, you can open your awareness to magically detect undead. Until the end of your turn, you know the location of any undead within 60 feet of you that isn't behind total cover and isn't protected from divination magic. The senses don't tell you anything about the creature's capabilities or identity. It's kind of like a divine sense that the paladin gets, except it's only for undead, and you can only do it equal to your wisdom modifier, and they can hide behind cover, which is quite interesting to get away from it. This is useful. It makes sense for the character to have. I quite like it. Bit of a utility thing. I don't really know if it tells you how many undead there. No, it does. It tells you the location of any undead. Okay, this is better than Divine Sense in some occasions. So I quite like it. Path to the Grave. As an action, pardon me, you can use your channel divinity to mark another creature's life force for termination. As an action, you can choose one creature you can see within 30 feet of you, cursing it until the end of your next turn. The next time you or an ally of yours hits the cursed creature with an attack, the creature has vulnerability to all that attack's damage, and then the curse ends. Which, worst case scenario, you are going, next person to hit this person gets double damage. Best case scenario is it's going, this person who primarily has fire-based spells can now hit this person who doesn't normally, has a bit of resistance. They can hit them for full damage. So effectively you're always doubling your damage. Unless the wording of this has vulnerability to all attack damages. If you had immunity to that damage, would they cancel out and you have regular damage? Or would it replace immunity with vulnerability just for this attack? If it's that one, where it replaces your vulnerability, it replaces your immunity with vulnerability, then this becomes so much better. Because you're taking an attack that would do no damage and you're changing it to an attack that would do double damage. Overall, that's a really fun channel divinity. At 6th level, you gain the ability to impede death's progress. As a reaction, when you or a creature you can see within 30 feet of you, so for a critical hit, you can turn that hit into a normal hit. Any effects triggered by a crit hit are cancelled. I like that. You effectively are saving your ally from a lot of damage, and as it says here, there are a decent amount of like monsters that have abilities where it's like, if I crit, I do this. Pardon me. So this can be very useful in those situations. They don't come up too often, but when they do come up, they are like quite annoying. And this could save somebody from dying. Let's just say I've had situations where, because of a crit, I'm so close to straight up dying. In fact, I should have if it wasn't for the DM forgetting a rule he'd given that thing. Keeper of Souls. Starting at 17th level, you can seize a trace of vitality from a parting soul and use it to heal the living. When an enemy you can see within 60 feet of you, you or one creature of your choice that is within 60 feet of you regain hit points equal to the enemy's number of hit die. You can use this feature if you are incapacitated. If you aren't incapacitated, once you use it, you can't do it until you stop, and can't do so again until the start of your next turn. Okay, so you watch the person die, and then you go, okay, I use my ability. I heal hit points equal to the enemy's number of hit die. I don't know how good that is. Let me check something. Bestiary. Let's just type in dragon. Right, how many hit die do you have, dragon? Is that 17? Is that supposed to be... Does that mean it's 17? I don't know where you see hit die on these things. If we assume that that 17 is how many hit die it has, you're healing 17. That's not bad. Why did it take me to Artificer there? It's not bad, honestly. A little bit of healing at that point. It's a bit of an underwhelming ability. But it will come up in like large scale fights. It could like completely ignore the problem or like the chip that you would take in a large scale fight. Say that you're trying to get to a big bad boss, but to get to him, you got to go through his personal guard, and his personal guard are for your level. They are the equivalent of like if you were level 3 and you were fighting a bunch of goblins. They're scary, and they do a decent amount of damage, but they're not like too scary. This can make it so it's like you come out of this fight not 3/4 health, but instead you come out of this fight with near enough full health, which can be quite useful. Knowledge. This one's interesting because in my head I consider this the equivalent of magic. But I guess the logic here is you can worship magic and worship it as this mystic phenomena, or you can worship magic in the knowledge domain, which is that you hoard the knowledge and maybe you try and you worship more the sort of strict logical part of magic that comes from the construction of spells. You get access to a decent amount of spells, like all of them did, except these ones are quite interesting in the sense that they give you access to stuff like suggestion, command, confusion, like manipulation of the mind, which I guess makes sense with the idea of manipulation of knowledge. But most of these, in fact, all of these are out of combat spells, which sort of gives you an idea of what is sort of expected of this subclass. You know, identify is useful, augur's really useful, so is speak with the dead, but they're all useful out of combat things to help you with, you know, the story in some capacity, which is different to what we've seen with almost, I think with all of them before, which have had at least one damaging move. In addition to the spells, you get access to 2 languages of your choice. Always good, can come up occasionally. If you like have something like primordial, and then you go to the elemental plane at one point, or you're dealing with like a maybe an elemental evil kind of style cult, and then you find you're dealing with like a couple of fire elementals in armor, and it's like you talk with one of them and they're like, please free me, I'm not doing this on purpose, there's nothing I can do from me physically. And you can relay that, and maybe you get allies against this cult instead of having to kill these enemies that you would ordinarily assume they were just enemies. Also, you get access to either arcane, history, nature, or religion. Still find it weird that both nature and religion are intelligence based. I feel like religion especially, and nature as well, shouldn't be intelligence based because they're more like. I understand that there is an intelligence part of nature and religion. There's knowing every plant in existence, you know, encyclopedias on plants and animals, or like you know the history of this religion and all of you've learned all of the stories of all the saints and all of the angels of this religion. But I kind of see it as most of the time with nature, the main thing is feeling, and religion is feeling. At least with when you're playing a cleric or a druid, and I feel like it maybe should be wisdom, or getting the wisdom from nature, wisdom from religion. I don't know if I particularly like it being intelligence, but I do understand why. And a good DM will allow you to use this ability. I say a good DM. That's mean, actually. Some DMs will allow you, because it's not necessarily a good decision to do this, so I can't say good DM. Some DMs will allow you to use nature and religion in different ways depending on how you're using it, and roll assuming you're doing it a specific way. Also, your proficiency bonus is doubled for any ability checks you make with either of these skills, effectively giving you expertise in those skills. Your channel divinity. You can use your channel divinity to tap into the divine well of knowledge. As an action, you choose one skill or tool. For 10 minutes, you have proficiency in it. Again, very out of combat ability. Most of the time, and this is my experience, my groups have a wide variety of skills. There'll be one person who has a load of skills. There'll be your bard, there'll be your rogue, to a certain extent there'll be your artificer. And then there'll be a bunch of other people that have specialized groups of skills that make sense for their character to have. But there might be a bit of overlap with a person with a load of skills, but mostly that covers a lot of stuff. So having this to sort of fill in those gaps that maybe you don't have, like tool wise, maybe you're in a situation that would be really useful if we had somebody who knew how to use carpenter's tools. Well, I can use my action to give myself the tool proficiency, and then we can just go get some carpenter's supplies and I'll use it. Simple as. You also get another channel divinity. I like this idea because it's like these are the two channel divinities are the two ways that you can sort of see this class as. Whereas the first one seemingly was about the amassing of knowledge. Like it's simple as I have a load of knowledge that I've learned over the years and I'm using it. Whereas this one, read thoughts, which is, you can use your channel divinity to read a creature's thoughts. You can use your access to the creature's mind to command it. As an action, choose one creature you can see within 60 feet and make a wisdom save, and if they succeed, go and use this feature on them again until you finish a long rest. If they fail the save, you can read their surface thoughts. When it's within 60 feet of you, it lasts a minute. During this time, you can use your action to end this effect and cast a suggestion spell on them without expending your spell slot. So you see here, it's more the intrusive version of knowledge. Where it's like, I want to know everything so that I can use it to manipulate you. Like, I see knowledge as power, and so every bit of knowledge I get is more power that I can use. And see, it's sort of two sides appear in the two sides of channel divinity. You get potent spellcasting, which is it's like Blessed Strike, but it's the ranged, like magic specific one, which instead just gives you wisdom modifier on all of your cantrips, just increasing the damage by a bit. Then there's Visions of the Past. Starting at 17th level, you call up visions of the past that can relate to an object you hold or your immediate surroundings. To an object you hold or your immediate surroundings. Okay. That, for some reason, that read weirdly. You spend at least 1 minute in meditation and prayer, then receive a dreamlike, shadowy glimpse of recent events. You can meditate in this way for a number of minutes equal to your wisdom score and must maintain concentration during this time, as if you were casting a spell. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long or short rest. Holding an object object reading. Holding an object as you meditate. I keep saying mediate, it's meditate. As you meditate, you can see visions of the object's previous owner. After meditating for 1 minute, you learn how the owner acquired and lost the object, as well as the most recent significant event involving the object and that owner. If the object was owned by another creature in recent past, within a number of days equal to your wisdom score, you can spend 1 additional minute for each owner to learn the same information about that creature. Very interesting. It's like there's a word for being able to sort of sense like feelings from objects. I forget what it was. I looked it up. It's like, like how there's telekinesis. It's one of the kinesises. But it's very interesting that you get something like that, and it makes sense. You're learning the knowledge contained within an item. The other ability is area reading. As you meditate, you see a vision of recent events in your immediate vicinity, a room, a street, tunnel, clearing, or the like. Going back a number of days equal to your wisdom score. Wisdom score is interesting because that means that about at this point, probably have a 20 in that. So it's 20 days ago. For each minute you meditate, you learn what about one significant event, beginning with the most recent. Significant events typically involve powerful emotions, battles, betrayals, marriages, murders, births, funerals. However, they also might include more mundane events that are nevertheless important in your current situation. It's plot. It's a plot ability, which is very useful for the DM to sort of anticipate that you will use in a situation. Overall, knowledge is interesting because it's the first class we've seen that's been purely out of combat. The only ability that's sort of useful in combat would be the mind control, not mind control, read thoughts and suggestion ability. And even then, not really. I quite like it. I've never really thought of a idea for a character for a knowledge-based one, but I think its abilities are very useful out of combat, and you wouldn't be in a situation that I always feel bad when I'm in it, and I feel really bad when I've put someone else in, which is a situation where I feel like I can't do anything for a long period of time of out of combat stuff because none of my skills are better than someone else's skill in that thing. So say I'm a rogue and somehow there is a bard here that's got better stealth than me and better sleight of hand than me and better acrobatics than me. It's like, well, what do I do? They're the skills I focus into, and there's someone already better than me, so I'm stuck here doing nothing in any situation that isn't combat or roleplay. But even with roleplay, the whole point is the skills are supposed to, help with that. Sort of make you realise where you're supposed to be specialised. So when you put someone in that situation, or when you've put someone else into that position, it can be really, really, really off-putting. So I think I quite like this. I just hope that you don't put someone in that situation. Sorry, I went on a tangent there. Sort of forgot where I was. I quite like this. Quite like this cleric, even though it's quite very much it's an old one, so it doesn't seem particularly strong. I think this one's fine, and I think the out of combat stuff will be really fun. As I said, even if I don't have a particular skill that I'm better at than someone else. Next is life. Now, I know a lot about life. Life is one of the originals. Um, as you can see straight ahead, you can sort of guess what kind of class it's going to be based on the spells you get. Bless, Cure Wounds, Lesser Restoration, Beacon of Hope, Revivify, Death Ward, Guardian of Faith, Mass Cure Wounds, Raise Dead. All of those, except for I guess Raise Dead and Spiritual Weapon, are heal support spells. Heal/support spells. That's probably what you're going to be doing. You also get access to heavy armor, which initially probably shocks you. It definitely shocked me because I was like, hold on a second. I kind of assumed I'd be taking the sort of generic healer role that I see in a load of MMOs. Stand at the back, heal, support the tank or DPS in there, and generally stay out of harm's way. But no, you get access to heavy armor, which implies it wants you to be there tanking as well. It's quite interesting that it does this because I like it. It's a bit of a bit of like a switcheroo that you'd never expect. Although I wouldn't go as far to say people never expected this, but it's a bit of a switcheroo. I quite like it because I quite like the idea that you're not just sitting in the back healing them. You're sitting at the front healing people, but also taking the hits yourself. In a way, healing them because you're blocking hits that would have hit them. Also, at first level, your healing spells are more effective, so it makes the thing you're probably going to be focusing on a lot even better. When you use a spell of first level or higher to restore hit points to a creature, the creature regains additional hit points equal to 2 plus your spell level. Just a little bit of extra. Because of this ability, the later spells, it's going to be as relevant as in the earlier spells. Maybe not as relevant, but still relevant. Channel Divinity, Preserve Life. As an action, you present your holy symbol and evoke healing energy that you can restore a number of hit points equal to 5 times your cleric level. Choose any creature within 30 feet of you and divide the hit points among them. The feature can restore a creature to no more than half its health hit point maximum and can't be used on constructs or undead. This is pretty good. It's a quick burst heal that you can use probably getting into like the second half of a big boss fight to sort of go, hey, here's a big heal to everybody. And it will be useful because even later levels where you're like I'm going to use like level 15 because I'm shit at maths. It's like, okay, well, I use this. It's 5 times my cleric level, so it's 5 times 15, which means I'm doing this for, what is it, like 75? No, it's just 60. No, it's 5 times, so it is 75. I'm an idiot. 75 HP split along the whole group. Just like, okay, everybody's at like half now. Realistically, it could be something like that. Although some people will have maybe like 200 health, so maybe that doesn't get them to half, but it tops everyone up. Means they can survive maybe another attack that they wouldn't normally. Then you have Blessed Healer. Beginning at 6th level, the healing spells you cast on others heal you as well. When you cast the first level or higher spell that restores hit points to a creature other than you regain hit points equal to 2 plus your spell level. So that little bonus heal that you give to others, you now also heal yourself for that amount as well. What's good about this is it's an ability that broadens the gap between the two big things that you have for your class at this point. 1, you've got heavy armor. 2, you're healing a lot. This one goes, okay, now you're incentivized to not just stand there and take the hits, but also to use your spells on other people and get the little bit extra every time you do it, assuming you're not about to fall unconscious. You get Divine Strike. This one does Radiant. As you can see, they're all themed. They're all the same, but they're themed in damage types. Supreme Healer. Starting at 17th level, when you would normally roll one or more dice to restore hit points with a spell, you instead use the highest number possible for each die. For example, instead of restoring 2d6 hit points to a creature, you restore 12. This is huge. I think of the Player's Handbook classes, this is the one with the most impactful capstone ability. Because this one goes, all your heals are max. That's insane. You're at this point where you're just going, okay, I do mass cure healing word. It's guaranteed to give you max. Now that's not much, obviously, but the higher level spells, you just get always getting max from them, and then you're also getting a little bit for yourself. It's huge. It's you increasingly become this such a like important pillar for your group. More so, I feel like even just a regular healer would be, because of all these bonuses you give for healing. Just are very useful. Overall, I love the Life Cleric. I haven't had chance to have one before, to play one before, but I would love to. Now on to Light. Now I have a lot of experience with Light. My last character with one of my GMs was a Light Cleric called Father Jim. He was a great guy. Based him on Friar Tuck. I quite like it. The problem that I'm sure is a problem for a lot of these player handbook channel divinities specifically, and abilities. So not channel divinities specifically, features specifically, is that it gets really outmatched. And I know this the most for Light Domain, because I know more about Light Domain than the other clerics, because it's the only cleric I've played recently. First off, Light Domain gets access to a lot of powerful spells that you wouldn't get access to normally. Notably, Fireball. Very good for its level. Still only gets Flame Strike, which isn't great as a spell. But generally, as you can see here, it'll be a damaging move, and then sometimes even another damaging move, or like a utility move that has the word fire in it, really. And then at the end, they just give you scrying. Because I guess you can scry using a fire pit, maybe? I don't really understand why scrying's here. My guess is, if this was made recently, that this spell would be replaced with another 5th level spell that has fire related damage. Because there wasn't as many at this point. And that can come up occasionally with all subclasses, really, of the older ones, where you're like, the one that I could think of at the top of my head is like, you'd think of the Storm Domain, and you're like, well, of course this is going to have X spell because it's a really cool lightning spell that makes sense thematically. And then you look at it and you go, that spell isn't there. Why don't I get access to that spell? And then you realise it's because that spell came out after this subclass came out. So yeah, generally damaging spells, and then bonus cantrip, you get Light Spell. Very good, thematic, it makes sense, it's literally the Light Domain. If I didn't get access to the Light Spell, which I would always have because it's a cleric spell, but if I didn't get access to it naturally, it'd be a bit weird. Warding Flare. Now this is the feature I was talking about. At first level, you can interpose divine light between yourself and the attacking enemy, effectively using a flashbang. When you're attacked by a creature within 30 feet of you that you can see, you can use your reaction to impose disadvantage on the attack roll. So this shows quite quickly you don't want to be getting hit as this character. Now I know, obviously all people don't want to get hit, but this one is specifically avoiding getting hit instead of buffing your health. That to me, with the spells, implies you're supposed to be a backline fighter. Obviously not a fighter, backline ranged combatant. Causing light to flare before the attacker before it hits or misses. An attacker that can't be blinded is immune to this feature. You can use this number of times equal to your wisdom modifier. Now, this line here, you will see nowadays a lot of spells that do not have this line of text, that do the exact... I say a lot of spells. One spell in particular that does this ability, but does not have that, which makes it strictly better, plus adds an additional feature. I'm of course talking about Silvery Barbs. Silvery Barbs does what this does, without that little restriction, and also gives advantage to another person. Now admittedly, that's a first level spell, but it still does my ability but better. And at this point, I can only do it on myself. You'll see later on. Yet we get something else. Channel Divinity. Now this is actually just really good, especially early level. As an action, you present your holy symbol, and any magical darkness within 30 feet of you is dispelled. I love little abilities like this. They're not the main part of the ability, but if they come up, it's like it makes everyone like happy, because it's like, oh look, there's this little ability we didn't even see before that we now see, and it's really good. Well, not really good, but it's had an impact. Additionally, each hostile creature within 30 feet of you must make a con save. A creature takes radiant damage equal to 2d6 plus your cleric level on a failed saving throw, and half as much on a successful one. A creature that has total cover is not affected. That's fine. That is one of the few times where a creature that has total cover from you is not affected makes sense, because then they wouldn't be blinded. As you can immediately see with this spell, keen-eyed people can notice that it doesn't scale particularly well. It's 2d6 plus cleric level, which early on is huge. You can't get that from spells, but later on, why are you wasting an action on this when you could be casting a higher level spell that does this plus more? But I very much like this ability. Especially this dispel thing. It's an AoE. If you get a couple people in the effect, it really shows its power. No complaint about that, except it doesn't scale particularly well. Improved Flare. You can now use it on a creature within 30 feet of you. At this point, it's still weaker than Silvery Barbs. It doesn't even get better later on to the point where it isn't. And I know I'm saying Silvery Barbs. There is actually another ability that I forget on which subclass it is, but it gives you effectively this, but better again. Except that one's not as good as Silvery Barbs. Finally, Corona of Light. Starting at 17th level, you can use your action to activate an aura of sunlight that lasts for 1 minute until you dismiss it. You emit a bright light in a 60-foot radius and dim 30 feet beyond that. Your enemies in bright light have disadvantage in saving throws any spells that deal fire or radiant. I love this ability. Not particularly strong, but I think it makes such narrative sense that I love it. Overall, I found light very fun. And to the end of I think this to me brings up a really good point, which is I've been talking about how the older, like, original subclasses for cleric are quite weak. I'm saying that just generally, but it doesn't mean that I particularly think you shouldn't play them. It's not supposed to be a jab at them in that capacity. It's more to saying that you have to acknowledge that when you go into this, you will be weaker than somebody if they had taken a newer subclass. Generally, they are very, very fun to play still. I had a load of fun with the Light Cleric. Not just because I really like the character, but because I feel like this subclass was good. It helps that inherently the class is good. And for another one of my characters, I picked a rogue subclass that was one of the Grim Hollow ones, and I didn't particularly like it. And yet I'm still playing that character and loving playing that character because the rogue class itself is good. I love the Warding Flare and the improved Flare because it goes from you protecting yourself to protecting your allies. Problem is, and it could just be me, especially when you hit that improved flare button, improved flare ability, you'll increasingly see that every level there's less and less and less of creatures that just have regular sight. that have no alternative sight, no tremor sense, no blind sight, no true sight, no, any kinds of these alternate sights. And so more and more you will find situations where you can't use that ability that's part of your class. And I brought this up for the blood domain, and I'm bringing it up again, but the reason why I get iffy about clauses like that, even though they make so much thematic sense, is it gets you in situations where you're sitting there going, I have this really cool ability that makes my subclass unique. I can't use that ability. I'm stuck here with nothing from this class that I can use, and that makes me feel bad. It makes me feel sad. And I don't like those situations. So a lot of the time I feel like those abilities that put me in that situation are bad because I hate the situation. The worst feeling for me is a feeling that I'm sitting here and I can't do anything. Now that doesn't mean like, oh, there's a one-on-one happening between the GM and a player, because at that point I'm interested in their story. It's when I'm in a situation that involves all of us and I'm sitting there going, I can't do anything to help here. There's nothing I can do. I can't do anything in combat. I can't do anything. I can't use my cool ability in combat that can help in this situation. It's especially bad for the Blood Hunter, but we're not talking about the Blood Hunter here. Anyway, I went on a tangent. Light and Blood, even though I'm saying all this stuff, are really fun. I quite like Light. Moon domain. Yeah, this is a Matt Mercer special. So my guess is it's going to be decent in terms of what sort of message or what play style he's expecting. Okay, let's have a look. Get access to a decent amount of out of combat abilities. Notably silent image, mostly used out of combat. Invisibility can be used in combat, but I've seen it more used outside of combat. Same with major image. Hypnotic pattern can be used in combat. Same with hallucinogenic training. And dream, no, you can't really. Pass wall, I really don't think is particularly useful, but it's there. So it's on more the out of combat side, but it has some very powerful in combat stuff like Moonbeam, which makes sense. It's literally the moon domain. So that's interesting. I would have thought they would have gone more aggressive and go into the lycanthrope idea with like the druid of the moon kind of stuff. Let's have a look at its first level ability. When you choose this domain at first level, you learn to shine light upon the mind's most dire moments, shielding those you protect. When a creature within 30 feet of you that you can see makes a wisdom saving throw, you can use your reaction to grant that creature advantage in the saving throw. So just on these abilities, I'm kind of getting this idea of the moon being a protective shield for people who are like shielding your mind from like negative feelings, and that really helps people of lycanthropy because it sort of shields their mind from the rage and the wild sort of instinct that appears when they shape change. Is my guess. By the way, I quite like both of these. I like this ability. Just giving your friends advantage is always fun. It makes you feel like you're helping the group. And these spells are always going to be fun to use. Channel Divinity, Blessing of the Full Moon. So let me take a sip. You can use your channel divinity to infuse your allies with bestial power, so they do go into the lycanthrope stuff. As an action, you instill a willing creature of your choice within 30 feet of you that you can see with one of the following blessings of your choice. You choose a creature of your choice within 30 feet, and for 1 hour, the blessed creature speed increased by 10 feet and have advantage on wisdom, perception, or survival checks involving smell or made to track a creature. So you give them like the wolf sort of like blessing, which is very useful. That increased speed will come up, and if you're tracking somebody, that other bit will also come up. Blessing of the blood drenched moon. For 10 minutes, the blessed creature has advantage on attack rolls against a target if at least you give them pack tactics. Interesting. So they get advantage if there's an ally within 5 feet of you. 5 feet of the person you did that on. So I like this. There's your out of combat one, or your more out of combat one, which is the increased speed and tracking. And then you got your in combat one, which is using a different part of the wolf. I quite like that. Empowered cantrips. This is just the one that adds wisdom modifier. I just wanted to double check it. As Eclipse of Ill Omen. You call upon the vermilion moon to flare in the sky above you. I thought vermilion meant green, but I don't know what it means in this context. Its power surrounds you even when the sky can't be seen, and even onto other planes. As a bonus action, you can manifest an area of reddish dim light. So I guess vermilion means red. And a 60-foot radius around you. In addition to the normal effects of dim light, creatures in the area make saving throws with disadvantage. So it also affects allies. When you create this eclipse, you can choose... okay, never mind. You can just choose them to not be affected. That's a very useful ability. That is a very, very useful ability. Because... I know there's more there, but just talking about that ability, it's very useful because you can have another friend whose whole shtick, if they're a bard or something, is saving throw based manipulation, right? Hold person, suggestion, command, those kinds of abilities. And you just go ahead with that, mate. They have disadvantage. Do your best on them. Okay, the eclipse lasts while you concentrate, as if you're concentrating on a spell, for up to 1 minute. Okay, fair. Concentrating on this feature counts as concentrating on a moon domain spell for the purpose of Mind of Two Moons. Did I miss this? I did. Let me have a look at this. Sorry, I completely missed it. Starting at 6th level, you can use your channel divinity to invoke the twinfold arcane of Exandria's moons. By expending one of your channel divinities, you can cast a second concentration spell while you're concentrating on the first. If you need to make a con save, you make it for both spells. That's insane. I can't believe I missed that. That's such a powerful channel divinity. I can keep Moonbeam up while also having greater invisibility up. That's insane. You can have Moonbeam and this up to give them disadvantage on their Moonbeam saving throws. Jesus. That is a cool combination. I'm glad that it had a reference text here, or else I would have completely missed it. Additionally, once per turn, when you deal radiant damage to a creature in this area of dim light, you can curse one of the creatures until the end of the eclipse. Cursed creature has half speed and can't regain hit points. Jesus, he's definitely up the power with this one. The fact that I can have this spell, I can have this aura on them. In addition, I can be hitting them with Moonbeam. Or I can be concentrating on my invisibility so they can't get me, and a Moonbeam at the same time. And with something like greater invisibility, it doesn't have that clause of if I attack it disappears, like this one does. So I can just be sitting there with a Moonbeam on them, and my greater invisibility, and just be peppering them with, like, attacks. That's insane. I like the moon. I like the moon one. I think my only, not gripe, but my wish for it would have been that it had a bit more relevance to the wild side of it. But I guess it's just because I want there to be a more primal, like, animal sort of cleric. The same way I want there to be more stuff like that in fantasy in general. I always am annoyed that nature always means plants, and it normally means peaceful, and it doesn't really get into what nature kind of also is, which is that nature is unforgiving. It's survival of the fittest. It's the animals that, hunt other animals to live. Because, I mean, they have to live. And that's the thing about it. It's not malicious. It's never malicious. But it is death. And so I kind of wish people would go into that more. But that's my only complaint. And it's not a complaint of the class. It's a complaint on what I wish to see more of that I kind of hoped this class would have. Overall, very good class. Nature Dominion. Sorry, Domain. I keep calling it Dominion, but I don't think I'm technically, like, wrong with that one as well. The Nature Domain has, as you could probably expect from an old sort of subclass, it has a bunch of spells, but also there's probably a spell that if you know D&D that you've got in your head that you're like, why doesn't it get that? Probably because it came out after it. Animal Friendship, Speak with Animals, makes sense for them to have. I will say, Speak with Animals, I don't get much use out of it. Same with Animal Friendship. Bark Skin, how much does this give you? That's not going to be very useful after a bit either. It's not bad early on though. Spike Growth, I freaking love Spike Growth. There's been many times where either I or someone in the group have used a Spike Growth to fundamentally change your combat. Because they're wading through this, and you get a turn or two of them wading through it. And in that time, you're attacking them, and also every time while they're wading through it, they're taking damage after damage. Sure, it's not that much, but it adds up. Plant Growth. I haven't been able to use this effectively, but I could see its use because it gives them like super difficult terrain, which can also be stacked with difficult terrain because it isn't difficult terrain. Wind Wall, very useful spell to keep enemies out. Slightly different to Fire as it doesn't do constant damage, but it does immediately do a decent amount of damage. Dominate Beast might come up. Your beasts become increasingly less relevant the longer you go on, because beasts, for some reason, and I don't particularly agree with this, by the way, on a tangent, but beast, there's loads of creatures that are, for all intents and purposes, in the world of Wizard of the Coast, are beasts. They're naturally occurring creatures that exist in the world, right? and have no magical effects to their abilities. Like an owlbear. An owlbear has no magical abilities, and for that world, they can, in some worlds, be naturally occurring, right? In most settings, they are considered naturally occurring creatures. Why are they not beasts? I think more stuff should be beasts. But because there isn't that many beasts, and the best thing you're going to deal with in terms of beasts is like a giant gorilla. Or like a dinosaur. Because, you know, if you have a giant version of something, that's okay. But if you have a combination of two things that naturally occur in the world you are in, they're not beasts. Sorry, I'm annoyed about that stuff. Grasping vines. Conjure a vine in an unoccupied space of your choice that you can see within range. When you cast a spell, you can direct the vine to lash out within 30 feet of it that you can see. Like a dexterity saving throw will be pulled towards the vine. It's a crowd control ability that might come up. I kind of wish I knew about that for like some boss fights actually. But you can't move the vine, which is a bit of a problem. Insect plague, always decent. Tree stride, it will come up. I like tree stride. Also, in addition, you get Acolyte of Nature. You learn a druid cantrip, because this is the kind of like the sort of multi-class into druid, which makes complete sense. I kind of see the cleric of the nature domains being more onto the kind of like the agriculture side of nature, in the sense of like controlled nature but still loving nature, if you know what I mean. The druid cantrip doesn't count your number of cleric cantrips you know. You also gain proficiency in animal handling, nature, or survival, as you could probably expect. Nature, interestingly enough, which I didn't expect for nature, has the heavy armor thing. Now the reason I bring that up is because, as I said before, it's kind of like a subclass into, kind of like a multi-class into druid, and druids hate metal. And yet this one's going into heavy armor, which is exclusively metal. And you have Channel Divinity, charm animals and plants. As an action, you present your holy item. Each plant or beast that you can see within 30 feet makes a wisdom save. If they fail, they're charmed for 1 minute or until they take damage. While they're charmed, they consider you friendly. Not very useful. The plant one might come up a bit more, maybe, if you're dealing with... No, it's still not great. The problem with plant and beast is they are probably the two worst sort of types for creatures if you want powerful creatures. And I know it's like, oh, we don't care about power all the time, Jack. You just talked about how one of the clerics was really weak and yet you still loved it. You are right. I'm more talking, when I talk about powerful creatures in this context, I'm more talking about creatures that will be relevant to you the higher up you get. And what I mean by that is, if you're at level 6 or 7, you will probably increasingly see that you will not be fighting beasts as much. If you're not fighting beasts as much, this doesn't become as useful. And then the higher you get up, level 12, I'd be very surprised if you're fighting a beast. Level 15, you're never fighting a beast. This is a useless ability at that point. That's more what I mean. Damper elements. Starting at 6th level, when your creature within 30 feet of you takes acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder, so kind of the generic damage types except for poison that are there, you can use your reaction to grant resistance to that creature against that instance of damage. So you can effectively go, you're going to get hit by that spell, I half its damage. Very useful. As a tanking tool for yourself, and also as like a kind of like a tank ability for that helps your allies. Because in MMOs you would find abilities where it's like I can take the hit for them. And it's kind of like that, except you're reducing the damage and you're not taking the hit. You see that with the interception fighting style on like paladins and I think some fighters as well. A similar ability to this. Then you get Divine Strike. This one, you get Choice, which is the rare time in which the ability that you get on an older version of a subclass, sorry, an old subclass, is better than the one you get on the later subclasses. Because I guess they decided to theme it a bit more, whereas this one they went, okay, well, what do we do for nature? There isn't really a nature type, so I guess we'll go with naturally forming things. And they decided that was called Fire and Lightning, even though, you know, acid exists in real life. So does thunder. I mean, so it's like a bit weird that they chose those, but hey, whatever. I wouldn't know what to choose there either. At 17th level, you gain the ability to command animals and plants. Oh. Well, the creatures are charmed by your charm animals and plants feature. Pardon me. You can take a bonus action on your turn to verbally command what each of those creatures will do on their next turn. I'll be honest, this will be the first time I say this, but I don't think I like both that feature and the charm animals and plants ability. I think those are bad features. Narratively, they make sense. The problem with them is they aren't coming up. Having your capstone ability effectively be something that will never be used at that level, ever. I would confidently say that I don't believe that in a single campaign that I watch or play, there is going to be a significant combat that involves beasts at when the party is at 17th level. You just won't be fighting that stuff. It's simple as. It's because only the highest CR stuff at that point of the beasts and plants will be related to that. Now, this is assuming you were doing something in the Forgotten Realms using the stuff that's already provided to you. I think this ability becomes slightly better if you're with a GM and that you tell them about this ability and they go, fine, not to you but in their head, I'm going to add powerful plant creatures. Because that base, with what a beast is in D&D, can't really add powerful beast creatures. What they can add, powerful plant creatures. Because there's no real restriction on plants. There are plants with magical abilities. In fact, off the top of my head, there is a powerful druid / dryad that was added for the Ravnica MTG book, Magic the Gathering book. That is the highest CR plant creature, and it is powerful. Like it's a CR up there in the 20s, like it's a final boss level. And that is a way you can do plants powerful. But at base, with what we have, with the bestiary and everything, of all the book stuff that they're added, you're very unlikely to come up with a situation where that thing's going to be useful. It'll be useful early on, but not very good later on. And that's the kind of ability I want. I want an ability that either scales for the level that you're at, or is going to be useful anyway from the start. And if it can't do that, then I've got a problem with it. And so overall, I think nature might be the worst subclass we've come across right now. And it's not bad. It's just, I think, the worst of the group we've done. By the way, I can see how long this is taking. We're getting closer and closer to 2 hours. We're probably just going to do Cleric today then. Because I know for a fact Druid doesn't have a small amount. It's got not Cleric level, but not a small amount. Order originally came from the Amonkhet MTG book. Later I think was added into the Tasha's book. Yeah, which is fair because I quite like it. I think it was one of those ones that was added in the MTG Amonkhet book, but I could be wrong. It gives you what you expect from Order. A load of abilities to forcibly make people understand your lore. Sprinkled in a couple of abilities you'd expect from like a kind of a healer kind of thing. With, mass healing word, heroism, and they're kind of the only ones. The rest of them are like enforcing your will on the world, which makes sense. Another one of those ones that gives you heavy armor. You'll be seeing this a lot with clerics. It's kind of, if they're not supposed to be specifically a ranged damage dealer, they're probably either getting heavy armor, martial weaponry, or both. When you do this, when you choose this domain at first level, you gain proficiency with heavy armor, and you also get proficiency in intimidation or persuasion, which kind of shows you the duality of Order. You probably already figured out that Order inherently might have an undertone of being a bit sort of authoritarian. As you can see right here, it can be. Starting at first level, you invoke the power of law to drive an ally to attack. You cast a spell with a spell slot of first or higher and target an ally with the spell. That ally can use their reaction immediately after the spell to make one weapon attack against a creature of your choice that you can see. If the spell targets more than one ally, you can choose the ally who can make the attack. This is a really cool ability because not only can you word this as being like encouragement to an ally, but like, I'm going to cast haste on you, for example. Go ahead, show them your strength, and then it's like they get an attack in immediately. It can also be worded as, I order you to attack. Attack that person now. Also, it's really cool because it adds a little extra effect to a healing word you use on an ally. Like, healing word, now you get an attack. Not as useful if they're unconscious, although if they have a ranged weapon, maybe it's not too bad. I like that ability. It fundamentally changes how you've... I've said this a lot, but that one is one of the ones that fundamentally changes how you do this stuff. Order's Demand. Starting at second level, you can use your channel divinity to exert an intimidating presence over others. As an action, you present your holy symbol, and each creature of your choice that you can see or hear within 30 feet of you must succeed on a wisdom saving throw, or be charmed by you until the end of your next turn, or until the charmed creature takes any damage. You can also use any of the charmed creatures. You can also cause any of the charmed creatures to drop what they're holding when they fail the saving throw. This is a quite interesting ability because it's a charm ability, a mass charm ability, which most of the time I'm a bit hesitant on because charmed abilities are quite restrictive, especially in combat. They can be used decently out of combat, but when you say as an action you can do this, it makes me kind of feel like you're assuming it's going to be in combat, but I could be wrong. But the fact that you can just go, they can just drop anything they're holding, it's huge. It can be a game changer in the fight. Because you could charm somebody, make them drop it, then you can make one of your friends could then pick it up, and then you might have taken away their primary weapon. That's huge. I quite like this ability as well. It makes sense for the channel divinity. Embodiment of Law. At 6th level, you become remarkably adept at channeling magical energy to compel others. Which again is one of those ones where you can take it as, I inspire other people, or you can take it as, I can enforce my law on other people. If you cast a spell of the enchantment school using a spell slot of 1st level or higher, you can change the spell casting time to a bonus action for this casting, provided the spell casting time is normally one action. So it allows you to hit them with a spell like suggestion, command, and then also in the background do something with an action. I quite like that. It gives you more stuff, more options that you can do, especially with abilities like, well, stuff you can do like in some settings where it's like I'm sorry, I do say like a lot. Like you're in a noble's ball or something, and there's this huge chandelier, and it's directly above a load of enemies. And what you can do then is you go, as an action, I chop the rope that's holding that chandelier up, and it drops on the enemies. Stuff like that. Very cool ability. Order's Wrath. Starting at 17th level, enemies you designate for destruction wilt under the combined effort of you and your allies. You see, I like the way they worded this, because it can be taken positively or negatively, or what I mean, like evil or good, right? You deal your divine strike damage to a creature of your choice. You can curse that creature until the start of your next turn. Next time one of your allies hits the cursed creature with an attack, the target also takes 2d8 psychic damage. Which is a nice narrative way of doing it, but effectively what it's saying is you get an extra 2d8 on your attack, just someone else has to attack to get that. I think it's okay. I don't know how it works if you decided to take this instead. That's fine. I'm sure the GM would see it as it doing the same thing. Gives you a little bit of extra damage. It's not particularly interesting as a capstone feature, but it's not horrendous. Anyway, I quite like the utility and the unique things you can do with this. So I like this one. I don't know if I put it higher than something like the stuff with blood and stuff and Forge that I quite like, but I'd put it. It's not the worst. It's much better than Nature. Peace Domain. I actually considered getting into this one for a backup character I was making. As you can guess from Peace Domain, almost all of its abilities are either buffing an ally or utility stuff out of combat, which makes complete sense. You gain proficiency in insight, performance, or persuasion. Again, makes sense. To try and keep the peace with persuasion, trying to like do non-violent decision specific stuff. Also, like making sure that you can figure out the person you're dealing with. Emboldening Bond. You can forge an emboldening bond among your people who are at peace with each other. As an action, you choose a number of willing creatures within 30 feet of you, equal to your proficiency bonus. You create a magical bond among them for 10 minutes or until you use the feature again. While any bonded creature is within 30 feet of another, the creature can roll a d4 and add that number to the attack roll, ability check, or saving throw it makes. Each creature can add the d4 no more than once per turn. So it gives you a kind of bless, but it's slightly weaker. It's a slightly weaker bless. And I like that ability a lot. I think it's quite powerful. I think one of the problems I'm going to talk about very early on is with inherently the fact it says Peace Domain in a game that has, if I'm being generous, 50% of it is combat. And the problem with this is, to me, that inherently you are anti-combat in a game about combat. And there are ways of going about it, and I think that's what you sort of have to come to the conclusion of, because you don't want to be that obnoxious guy who's like, I'm not going to help you because I don't care about what's happening. I don't care if you're dying to bandits. I'm a peace domain. I don't do war. I don't do combat. There's ways you can spin it where it's like you only do combat when it's necessary, or you believe in short-term violence for long-term peace. There's an evil way you can take it as well, which is quite interesting, is if you go like, I want peace, and the way I go about peace is I go like, is I will wipe out any that don't want peace. You know, like, I can't explain it very well, but if you've ever seen like Code Geass and stuff, you can make an argument that he's all about peace. Although he creates this huge war and makes him a public enemy #1 and unites everyone under him as he is a tyrant, he then tries to get himself killed. Well, he does orchestrate his death and then makes a long-lasting peace, and that was his objective. So you probably have to talk through with your DM and your other players so that you don't become insufferable in that aspect. Channel Divinity, Balm of Peace. You use your Channel Divinity to mask your presence. To make your presence a soothing balm. As an action, you can move up to your speed without provoking opportunity attacks, and when you move within 5 feet of any other creature during this action, you can restore a number of hit points equal to 2d6 plus your wisdom modifier. Any creature that can receive this healing only once. So it's kind of a move. It's a move plus heal where you don't take opportunity attacks. I think that this is a very interesting ability. It's a decently powerful heal, especially for 2nd level. And I think it adds a lot of utility, because if you're in a situation where you're trapped in combat and you're weak, you don't have a lot of health, and you don't have a proficiency in heavy armor or martial weaponry, so you're not really supposed to be in melee combat. You can back away while also healing all of your friends so that they can tank for you more. It's a very interesting ability, and I quite like it as a Channel Divinity. Protective Bond. The bond you form between people help them protect each other. When a creature affected by your emboldening bond, the previous feature that allowed you to have a sort of bless, is about to take damage, a second bonded creature within 30 feet of you can use their reaction to teleport to an unoccupied space within 5 feet of the first creature. The second creature takes all the damage instead. This could be very useful if your back line's about to take hits and you also want to get your front line close enough to the enemy so that they can start dealing with it. And so you're like, hey, you don't have to use your movement on your turn. I'm going to teleport you right there. You'll take some damage, but it won't hit the back line, and you'll be right next to them so that they can't really move away, and you can deal damage to them. It's especially good if it's you that's getting attacked, and so you teleport your friend closer to you, and then you, on your turn, when it gets to it, uses your Channel Divinity to both heal him, maybe one other person, while also getting out of there without taking attacks of opportunity. You get Potent Spellcasting. You get, what's the next one? Expansive Bond. Benefits of your Emboldening Bond and Protective Bond feature now work when the creature are within 60 feet of each other. Moreover, whenever a creature uses Protective Bond to take someone else's damage, they have resistance to that damage. So it's just making your overall thing more powerful. You can be further away. The dude who takes the hit takes less damage. Overall, a very interesting class. I very much like it it feels very much like you're still helping in combat, but you're very much a lot of its stuff is peace related, and you can see it in the way that their main feature is these bonds. I will say, this ability seems good, and then you realise the scaling isn't great. It can still be used as a mass heal, which is quite useful, but that's sort of where its use ends later on. So, overall, pretty happy with that. Now it's Tempest. Tempest is very fun. I've considered making a Tempest cleric before. As you can see with the spells, they've gone very much into the 3 main parts of a Tempest, in my opinion, or a Storm, which is lightning, lightning and thunder, rain, and wind, right? So you got fog, cloud, thunder wave, going into the thunder and wind. You got gust of wind and like lightning, and Core Lightning, which are all about the lightning and the wind and the ice, which I don't know if I agree with ice being there. But maybe because I've always associated Tempest with Storm, but maybe it also counts blizzards and it says here earthquakes. I never associate with this. I always felt like this spell list was another one of those ones where it's like it fails to get as many decent spells because of the problem that it runs into, which is that it didn't have access to as many spells as some of the later subclasses would have. Although Tempest is quite interesting because it's the first instance we've seen of having both martial weapons and heavy armor, which means more than any of these ones we've seen before, which you wouldn't necessarily get from its spell list. This is a frontline fighter. At first level, you can thunderously rebuke attackers. When a creature within 5 feet of you that you can see hits you with an attack, you can use your reaction to cause that creature to make a dex saving throw. The creature takes 2d8 lightning or thunder, your choice, on a failed save, or half as much on a successful. You can use this feature equal to your wisdom modifier. Decent, powerful ability. Narratively, it's really cool. It's like it's like I always forget its name, but it's what the tiefling gets, where it hits you back with fire-based abilities. It's like that, except obviously thunder and lightning, which is pretty decent. I quite like that. Channel Divinity Destructive Wave. Starting at second level, you can use your Channel Divinity to wield the power with unexpected ferocity. Power the sword with all unexpected ferocity. When you roll a lightning or thunder damage, you can use your Channel Divinity to deal maximum damage instead of rolling. See, this to me feels more and more like I'm right about the spell list thing, because there's ice and wind on there, and I understand wind to a certain extent, but the ice feels only there to supplement the thing, because they don't supplement the spell list because they don't have access to more lightning and thunder spells, because all this Channel Divinity specifically states lightning and thunder, whereas you would assume it would have said lightning, thunder, and cold if it wanted cold to be there. Although this ability is quite cool. I like it. It's very themed. Thunderbolt Strike. At 6th level, when you deal lightning damage to a large or smaller creature, you can also push them up to 10 feet away from you. Very useful with Core Lightning. Problem you're going to have, though, which will come up, is the bosses will always probably be bigger than that. There's exceptions, but it is something to bring up. The Divine Strike happens to be thunder. I feel like this one could have easily been thunder or lightning in your choice, but I don't really mind in general with that. Finally, there's Stormborn. Gives you a flying speed equal to your walking speed whenever you are not underground or indoors. Very useful. There aren't many abilities that give you flying speed, and giving you one that's not that limiting, really, is really, really good to see. Overall, I really like Tempest. I wish if it was going so much into martial weapon, heavy armor, frontline, that a couple of its abilities, like its spell list, you could theme haste as being like overcharging yourself with lightning. Give it more abilities that make sense for a melee fighter. And I wish some of these abilities focus more into that. Like this one doesn't necessarily. Like, why are you pushing them away when you want to be in combat? And neither the flying speed doesn't particularly help. I wish they changed that ability that pushed them away to something else, like not pushing away, but some other effect. And I wish the Stormborn ability had an additional effect in addition to the flying speed, to make it fit more into the idea of you are a melee fighter. Trickery, I'm gonna go out and say it, I don't like at all. It gives you a bunch of things you'd expect from trickery. So teleportation, like illusionary things, charms, money, like polymorphed for like pranks and stuff. Again, yeah, these are pretty cool abilities. They're great out of combat. They're really fun to use out of combat. No complaint about the spell list, really. Starting at Blessing of Trickster. Starting when you choose the domain at first level, you can use your action to touch a willing creature other than yourself to give them advantage in stealth. That's not going to come up much, in my opinion. I don't think this is a particularly good ability. You can't even use it on yourself, which isn't great because you're not necessarily got advantage on stealth. Invoke Duplicity. I don't particularly like this ability. It allows you to make an illusionary duplicate of yourself. As an action, you create a perfect illusion of yourself that lasts 1 minute until you lose concentration. The illusion appears in an unoccupied space that you can see within 30 feet of you. As a bonus action in your turn, you can move the illusion up to 30 feet to a space you can see, but it must remain within 120 feet of you. For the duration, you can cast as though you were in the illusion space. You may use your senses. Additionally, when both you and your illusion are within 5 feet of a creature that you can see the illusion, that can see your illusion, you have advantage in attack rolls against the creature, given how distracting the illusion it is to the target. I don't understand what the tricks are supposed to be, because this to me implies that you want your illusion to be closer. But I don't understand how you're supposed to play the character. Is it supposed to be a more melee one? We see nothing that says it does, but also it wants one of your dudes to be closer so that you get advantage on them, right? But all of your spells are mostly saving throws with the cleric. I don't understand it, and I found that it's sort of made for you to be more. Maybe it's just not my kind of thing, because I don't really understand it in any capacity. I can't explain it more than that. It has a channel divinity that makes you go invisible, but it's just casting invisibility. That doesn't interest me at all. If it casts greater invisibility, I'd understand it a bit more. It has Divine Strike. It does poison. That's the worst damage type to have. Improved Duplicity. You can make 4 of yourself instead of 1. That's kind of cool. But at the end of the day, I just don't understand the class in any capacity. And it's probably a me thing, but it makes it so I don't like it. It's probably like Bard, but I just can't think of any ideas or think about how it plays. And that to me makes it like not as good. For me. Just for me. That's a personal opinion on that one. I can't really see past it. Twilight Domain. Twilight Domain is very interesting. I didn't particularly understand what it represented for a while, but it's supposed to be like the equivalent of Grave, but for creatures of the night. So you get access to a lot of like themed things. Fairy fire to keep light in the night. Sleep to put people to a blissful sleep. Moonbeam because the moon's out. See invisibility because they'll be hiding in the darkness. So it's kind of like invisibility. Bunch of auras that are just there to help buff you and buff your allies really. Tiny hut to protect you at night. Greater invisibility to use the enemy's weapon against them. Circle of power to carve a territory that they can't get into. And mislead I've never freaking seen before. Oh, so it's to, I guess, another one of those greater invisibility things where you're using their power against them. Another one of these that has martial weaponry and heavy armor. What's interesting about that is it, again, focuses you heavily onto melee, which you don't necessarily think when you think of Twilight Domain. But this one has a couple of auras and stuff that kind of, and to a certain extent Fairy Fire, and greater invisibility, where it kind of makes sense for you wanting to be closer. Eye of Night. You can see through the deepest gloom. You have dark vision of range of 300 feet. In that radius, you can see dim light as if it was bright light, and and in darkness as if it was dim light. This is huge because it's this huge upscale from most people have 60 feet dark vision, and realistically you're getting that from your race unless you're playing human. You also don't get it if you have Dragonborn, but human's the one that's more likely to be played. And this is the best dark vision that I think you can get. There's very little that do better than this. And in addition, this goes, hey, do you have somebody in your group that doesn't have dark vision for some reason? So statistically, everyone will have it because it's 2 out of like 15 races that don't have dark vision. You can, as an action, you can share it with them. Up to your wisdom modifier, which will be more than enough for an hour. That's most of that will be a fight and maybe most of an investigation a lot of the time. Vigilant Blessing. As an action, you give one creature you touch advantage on the next initiative roll the creature makes. This is interesting. This allows you to, if there's anyone that needs to go first, which can be important for like the assassin rogue, to a certain extent I think the scout rogue, and there are just classes that always want to be the first one in there. A lot of front lines like to be first because that means that they can get into melee with the enemy, and they can't. The enemy can then not, maneuver in a way to try and attack the back line. So that can be quite useful. Channel Divinity Twilight Sanctuary. As an action, you present your holy symbol, and a sphere of twilight emanates from you. Centered on you, 30-foot radius, filled with dim light. It moves with you, lasts 1 minute. Whenever a creature, including you, ends its turn in the sphere, you can grant that creature one of the benefits. Temp health equal to 1d6 plus your cleric level, ends charmed or frightened. This is pretty decent. Like a little buff that you can have on yourself that means that anyone that's fighting in the front line with you has this constant effect of having like an extra d6 health, which means they take slightly less health every round, or they effectively just can't be frightened or charmed because you just get rid of it and they don't have to waste their turn doing a saving throw on it. It's huge. It's a nice little ability. Then you have Steps of Night. Got it right the third time. You can draw on the mystic power of night to rise into the air. There's a bonus action when you're in dim light or darkness. You can magically give yourself a flying speed equal to your walking speed for 1 minute. You can use this bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. There's a minute flying, which a lot of the time means in a battle flying. That's huge. Flying is very useful, no matter where you are. Even in caves it has some use. There's also the sort of, I don't know if you call it metagaming, but the way you can sort of, the best word is game the system, where you have it where you fly in an area that means that the enemy can't hit you with a melee attack, but you're not flying like over a pit, you're just flying up enough that they just can't reach you. And they'll have a ranged attack because from what I've seen, all DMs now give them a ranged attack so that you can't manipulate them, so they just can't attack you. But it does mean that they're probably hitting you with a weaker attack, because if they focus on melee, then the range is going to be slightly weaker. At least that would make sense, but I guess that's not always done. They get Divine Strike, and it makes Radiant. Makes sense. They're all about like giving light to the darkness and sort of like the duality between them, so it makes sense. And then their 17th level ability ups the Twilight Sanctuary to give half cover, which I think half cover is +2 AC. So that's pretty decent. And can come up like narrative, like it can come up in a lot of spells where it's like cover affects it and stuff. So that is a very useful ability. Twilight's very, very good. Very, very good. I think it's considered one of the most powerful subclasses, so I can see why And I can see why it would be considered that. A lot of its spells are very good as well. And having martial weaponry and heavy armor on something with decent abilities is always going to be powerful. Speaking of that, the final one I know that we're going to check also has that, which is quite interesting because they seem to be very backloaded in this alphabetical order subclass thing. This one is the War Domain, which again has that duality that I really like, that's obvious, where it's like heroic hero that goes to war against Overlord, or Overlord that went to war against everyone else. As you can see, it's probably the most obviously melee spell list it had out of all of them. You know, Shield of Faith, Magic Weapon, Spiritual Weapon, Crusader's Mantle, Stone Skin, Hold Monster to a certain extent, Freedom of Movement. As you can guess, from what I said, it has martial and heavy weaponry. Makes sense, you're going to war. But it also has, first level, your god delivers bolts of inspiration to you while engaging in battle. I kind of see it as like tactical information. When you use an attack action, you can make one weapon attack as a bonus action. So it just gives you that bonus action attack, equal to a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier. The problem with this is it's not that effective. It comes up, but that one extra attack increasingly becomes less and less relevant, and this doesn't scale in any way. Because once you have extra attack, it goes from doubling the amount of your attacks you get to using your bonus action to add a third more. And then later on it goes, okay. Actually, I don't even know if you get extra attack with this. So again, maybe it's not too bad. Never mind. I changed my mind. I'll come back to that if I see anything that gives them extra attacks. Starting at second level, you can use your Channel Divinity to strike with supernatural accuracy. When you make an attack roll, you can use your Channel Divinity to gain a +10 to that roll. And you can choose this after you see the roll. So this is very useful because it can be like you're in a situation where you need to hit. We need to get this damage on. And so you're like, fuck it, that I know this 7 won't hit. But you know what might hit? A 17. Very useful Channel Divinity. You get Channel Divinity War God's Blessing. When a creature within 30 feet of you makes an attack roll, you can use your reaction to then give the +10. So it's effectively an ally +10. I quite like that as well. Reminds me very heavily of the Light Cleric changes. Except these are 2 separate Channel Divinities instead of one that just gets an upgraded effect. Well, sorry, a feature that gets an upgraded effect. The Divine Strike, it just increases the damage you'll do. That's actually pretty good in a lot of situations because you'll have magical piercing, and then you'll up it to, you know, an extra bit of damage for magical piercing. Avatar of Battle. You gain resistances to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. Useless. So the problem with this ability is, surprisingly, I thought it would get extra attack. Because a lot of things do this when they go more melee based. This doesn't get extra attack. That's a huge negative to it. In addition, one of its Channel Divinities, it doubles the amount of attacks you do, but it doesn't even, if you are at a point where, say that you have a fighter in your group, and your fighter is also trying to be a front line. He's got heavy armor, he's got a sword, because he's a fighter. But you're at the point where you're level 11. At this point, he has more attacks than you, and without wasting its bonus action. With using his bonus action, he has more attacks than you at 5th level when you get the extra attack. It's not 5th level, but at whatever level you get the extra attack. 5th, it was 5th level. Never mind, I'm a genius. At that point, you're going to feel like you're not supposed to be melee. Because you're not getting... I feel like you need to be getting extra attack in addition. Sorry. Because of that, I worry that this isn't going to do as well as some others. Sure, you get spells that a fighter wouldn't get, because they don't get access to spells normally. But I think still, you're going to feel a bit lackluster because you want to be in melee. You don't even get access to the smites, which is a real shame. And I think this ability, Avatar of Battle, not going to be great. You do get access to Divine Strike, but the problem is that this ability, almost all fighters' subclasses will give them increased damage as well. At a similar level to this, if not earlier. And this is useless. I'm sorry. Maybe it's just the campaigns I've seen and watched, and it's not true for others, but everything, especially at 17th level that you're fighting, will have magical attacks. Because even the basic enemies are going to be high CR, and you're going to give them magical effects, especially if you're fighting if your main antagonist and the main things you're fighting are celestial in some capacity, fiends in some capacity, elementals in some capacity. These are going to have magical attacks. And monstrosities and abominations are also probably going to have magical attacks. It's very, very likely. If you're fighting humanoids, there is a good chance, nay, it's a very high chance, you'll be fighting extremely competent fighters that have magical weaponry, or spellcasters that are spellcasters, so have magical attacks. I just don't think this will come up much. So in conclusion, about Cleric, I think the only two that I think are not great, the rest of them are either good or better, are War and Nature. Which is a real shame, because I have had ideas for characters for War and I have thought of ideas for characters for Nature. And those class abilities have honestly put me off them. Having a quicker look now with you guys. So that's a real shame. Anyway, I know I said I was going to do 2, but what I more meant is I was going to do a normal stream, and it's already gone past 2 hours. In fact, it's nearing 2.5 hours, and my voice is coughing more and more because I still have the after effects of this illness. So I'm going to call it here. It was nice talking to everybody. Obviously, there isn't actually anyone here at the moment, but I don't know, maybe someone watches this VOD and so maybe thinks that, I'm like a friend that they can talk to. Cool. I guess I'm signing off. See ya.